I want to first compliment your comm staff because a couple of times this week I mistakenly said you were involved in the debacle of 2013. That was our friend John Kyle, not John Cornyn. But they're both great lawyers and they're both named John and they're from the Southwest. And your comms people would gently remind me, Hugh, you're going Joe Biden on us. That was not John Cornyn. So my hat is off to your comms team. Talk to us a little bit about why the border bill is dead.
Well, I think basically it boils down to a lack of trust. If President Biden can't be trusted to enforce existing laws, which were largely the same as the ones in place when President Trump was in office, then what gives us the confidence that he will enforce these new changes? I think that's basically what happened. People realized, well, we can't trust him. And so that's the reason I think it fell apart.
Now, I feel bad for Senator Langford, who spent months trying to get the best deal possible, but there might be a bright side here. The best deal possible from Democrats is no deal at all.
Yeah, well, James Langford is so well respected, widely respected. I mean, there's no better man in the Senate, and I feel bad for him. But this is a rough and tumble business sometimes, and there's nothing more complex than immigration law and the politics and the detail, the intricacy of the law. So he did his best, and that's all anybody can be asked to do. But I think basically it's a lack of confidence in the Biden administration.
Now, Senator, I don't know if they're ever going to talk about this in the conference this year, but would you please, when it comes up again, pass along the message, no wall, no bill, because I really do believe 9 out of 10 Republicans want that wall built over 900 miles of a 1,950-mile border, and unless and until it's in a bill, there ain't going to be a bill. Do you agree with me on that?
I think it's an essential part of a bill. The challenge we have now there is the catch and release policies of the Biden administration. People claiming asylum, of course, are walking in and turning themselves over. There are the issue of the gotaways, the 1.7 million people evading law enforcement, and certainly a physical wall would help deter them. And then there's the fact that even if people aren't claiming asylum, just in order to manage the public relations problem and the visual images on TV, the administration just releasing them and giving them work permits. Well, that's a huge magnet for more people to come, and they will, and they have.
That's what it's a necessary but far from sufficient step. It's a messaging device. It's the signal rather than the noise. Now, Senator, let's turn to what's coming up today. The border bill will be stripped from the supplemental. I am a big fan of the supplemental without the border bill. I want aid to Ukraine, Israel, Taiwan, and the United States defense base to pass. Have you decided what to do yet?
Yes, I'll support that. I don't think Vladimir Putin is going to stop in Ukraine. And we actually have a legal obligation based on the Budapest Memorandum in 1994, where Ukraine gave up their nuclear weapons in exchange for our agreement to help protect their sovereignty. NATO is just right next door. Those who remember their world history and World War II know that things can happen unexpectedly, small things that sort of cascade into big things. And I think in order to stop Putin, we need to continue to support Ukraine. And, of course, the Indo-Pacific is critical because President Xi has made it no secret. He tends to, quote, unify, close quote, mainland China with Taiwan. And, obviously, Israel is a longtime ally and deserves our support.
Now, Senator Cotton was on yesterday. He complimented Senator Collins for negotiating these provisions. When we add your support to his support, that means the conservatives are going to support this. There might be a couple who say no. Senator Paul is always a wild card, but it sounds to me like the supplemental will pass today. Is that a pretty good prediction?
Yeah, well, just to be clear, we'll proceed to the bill, and then, of course, there'll be an amendment process, and we don't know how long that will take. But my sense is that there is supermajority support in the Senate for the supplemental, absent the negotiated border provision.
Now, I am glad about that because it's serious. We live in very serious times, and I want the Congress to be serious. It will go to the House. There are some hardcore opponents of aid to Ukraine for reasons I don't agree with, but I recognize that they're there. Do you think Speaker Johnson can manage to get this to the bill using suspension?
I do. I think, he's obviously got a very thin majority, but this shouldn't be a party line vote. I think this will be a strong bipartisan vote in the House as well. And I applaud Speaker Johnson for navigating what is a very challenging political environment for him personally. But I know, based on his public comments, he recognizes the importance of these issues to our own national security and to peace in the world.
In the supplemental, Senator, what does it do for the home front? I believe it expands shipbuilding capacity and does a few other things, but what's it do for our bullets and missiles and our armories?
Well, that's been one of the biggest problems exposed by the Ukrainian or the Russian invasion of Ukraine is that our defense industrial base has not been up to speed to produce the weapons that are necessary. And of course, we've been providing some of these weapons to Ukraine, but depleting our own stocks in the process. If we ever had to fight a two-front war in Asia and in Europe, heaven forbid, but if we ever had to do that, our defense industrial base is not up to speed. And this is not something that you can turn off and on like a light switch. It takes investments, it takes incentives, and it takes time. I think we're beginning to make some progress there, but we're far from where we need to be.
It also seems to me that it's bipartisan. You've got Senator King today writing in favor of the supplemental, and if you've got Senator Collins drafting a lot of it for Republicans, they're both from Maine, but one is with the Democrats. I know Angus calls himself an independent. Is this genuinely bipartisan, absent the border stuff?
Yes, it is. And both Senator Collins and Senator King and I serve, along with Senator Cotton, who you mentioned earlier, on the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence. So we get classified briefings each week, literally every day, on the progress of being made and the challenges that are presented. So I think there's broad bipartisan awareness of the seriousness of the times we're living in and the threats we face, and I think that'll be reflected in the vote.
I hope so. Now, I'd like to turn to you to a little bit about what is going on inside the Republican Party. I get a full board of people who are opposed to Ukraine aid. They think Zelensky's corrupt, and they've got a lot of issues with everything. Are we going to make the argument and persuade our party to go back to be the party of Reagan, or is that a hopeless cause?
Well, we've always had this division among conservatives between the libertarians, who tend to be more what I would call isolationists, and what I would call traditional national security Republicans. And so I don't think that split is anything new. But I think what's missing is a president making the case, using the bully pulpit, and in the absence of a president actually making the case to the American people in the Congress, then things tend to fall apart. So, but I think there's a core of support, bipartisan support, that will keep us in a position of strength, and one that will provide deterrence to our adversaries, and one that will help us avoid the worst of potential consequences.
Now, last week, the United States hit 85 targets in 3 separate countries at the same time. Quite the demonstration of force. Iran blew that off and continued attacking through its proxies our troops in the Middle East. What do we have to, is that because we didn't mess it? Why are they doing that? Are they not afraid of us?
No, they're not. And, if you look back at the history of Iran since the revolution in 1979, they've been engaged in a war, low-grade war against the United States and Israel and the West for the last 45 years. And this included providing explosively formed penetrators to Iranian proxies in Iraq that killed American service members. You can just go down the list. The SEALs that died, the service members that were killed by the Shia militias in Iraq. This is all, Iran's behind all of this. The Iranian Revolutionary Guard and the Quds Force, General Soleimani, who was taken out by the Trump administration, thankfully, was the leader of that. But there are plenty more people who view Israel as something to be exterminated, and they've called the United States the Great Satan, and they're determined to fight us. So we need to focus more on Iran and maybe not so much on the proxies, because that's the head of the octopus.
Now, while I've got you, because I also have Justice Cornyn, he would be called that if he weren't a senator because he was a justice on the Texas Supreme Court. I want to ask you about this appeals court ruling yesterday in D.C. I'm not surprised that they struck down, given the panel, given the circuit, although Judge Henderson was on it. I'm not surprised they struck down former President Trump's claim of absolute immunity from criminal prosecution for acts done while president. But I also expect the Supreme Court to take it, the cert. If they do you think it will halt the New York and the Georgia proceedings? It would certainly halt the D.C. and the Florida federal proceedings, but would it halt the New York, or should it halt the New York and Atlanta proceedings?
Well, these were uncharted waters. Historically, the Office of Legal Counsel, the OLC, and the DOJ has provided authoritative guidance saying a sitting president can't be prosecuted for crimes. And so, I think this is a confluence of circumstances like we've never seen before. But I agree with you, the Supreme Court's going to have to decide it. I really sort of very concerned that, so much of what is political these days ends up being litigated and decided by the third branch that's supposed to be impartial and separated from politics, because they're sort of getting sucked into all this by necessity.
What is the result if, as I fear, Donald Trump were to lose very narrowly, even more narrowly than 2020, and then be exonerated of all charges because they were improvidently brought or conducted after the election? In other words, that he'd win on appeal after being convicted and losing in November. What would be the result for the United States? I think it would be horrific, but I don't think I'm persuading anyone.
No, I think it would be terrible. During the time that President Trump was in office, he was a victim of abuse of power, rather from the FBI and other elements of the government, as well as the mainstream media, that resulted in the appointment of a special counsel and the 2-year investigation by Robert Mueller that ended up with nothing. And so, I think there's a lot of sympathy for President Trump being the victim here, and I think it certainly polarizes our country and is not good.